Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are, and happy Friday. My name's Corey Wegner. I am as the slide says, the founding past president of the U.S. Committee of the Blue Shield and currently a board member at large of the Blue Shield. And in my day job, I'm the director of the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative, and I'm also a retired U.S. Army Reserve officer who served as an arts, monuments, and archives officer. So there'll be a few photos in this that you might, or that are my photos from different things that I have done, trainings that we've done for the Blue Shield, etc. So without further ado, just this image, in case you're interested, is a training we did a few years ago at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York for the 354th Civil Affairs Brigade that's based out of New York. I think it's the 357th. I can't remember all the numbers anymore. So a little bit about the history of the U.S. Blue Shield. President Bill Clinton had signed on to ratification of the 1954 Hague Convention during his tenure as president, but the treaty was not ratified by the United States. We were part of the original Hague Convention meetings in 1954, very active in that, but our system of government requires ratification by the Senate and signature by the president. And unfortunately, the Senate had never ratified the Hague Convention. Come along to 2003, and many people were active in trying to change that, including within government, external NGOs. Our president, Dr. Patty Gerstenblith, who's with us this morning, was very active in those efforts. But I think what really pushed us over the edge in the United States was the 2003 invasion of Iraq and the looting of the Iraq Museum, a picture of which you see here just after the US invasion. This is probably May 2003. So wide media attention for this. I'll submit even to this day that if you ask somebody what they remember about the US invasion of Iraq, it's, years and years of our military spent in Iraq, but a lot of people will say, I remember when that museum got looted. Also, a lot of damage generally to cultural heritage. This is a photo of damage done to Babylon. And of course, no government, no military force, and of course, especially not the cultural heritage community, are happy when they see headlines like US-led forces leave a trail of destruction and contamination in an architectural site of world importance. So this really got a lot of attention by the military. Obviously, I was there. It felt as though, I got deployed right afterward. There was a lot of angst. It was the moment when the stability also in the country began to kind of go downhill. And that was a terrible summer and fall of further damage and trying to recover from the looting of the Iraq Museum. And so I think it also galvanized the cultural heritage community in the US, which can sometimes feel a little bit stovepiped in that the archaeologists and the museums are sometimes at odds with each other over antiquities, looting, and sales. The library people don't always see themselves as going to the same meetings as the museum people, et cetera. But this moment in time where the US and the US allied coalition, and I think this also was definitely part of what spurred on the UK in their ratification of the Hague Convention, was that moment in time in 2003. And so in 2006, and even prior to that, those of us in the cultural heritage community, and at the time I was working at the Minneapolis Institute of Art as a curator, and I met Patty Gerstenblith. I met a number of people who were also interested in the same thing. Why is the United States not a state party to the 1954 Hague Convention? And together we created the US Committee of the Blue Shield. Now, it wasn't all smooth sailing. First of all, we had to find out how one creates a committee of the Blue Shield. And after a lot of discussions with then the International Committee of the Blue Shield, we recognized that it wasn't enough to just have a few like-minded, aggressive people out there doing the effort. We had to also enlist the pillar members of the International Blue Shield. And so we began the work of finding the organizations that represent the founding four or the four pillar organizations. And at the time, we also had the Moving Image, the CCAAA folks. And so this was our group of founding members, the American Institute for Conservation, American Library Association, the Association of Moving Image Archivists, SAA, which we have two SAAs in the US. It's the Society for American Archaeology, but we also have the Society of American Archivists. They were one of our founding members representing the IFLA, and the US National Committee of ICOM and of ICOMOS. So after a lot of kind of going around to those organizations and lobbying them for support, we had a pretty rough false start with ICOM, where the US Committee of ICOM and AAM, the American Alliance of Museums, couldn't figure out why we would need to do something like this. Never heard of the Hague Convention, completely not on board. And then we had to go back again a year later and really take the lobbying part seriously. But once they bought on, all the other organizations kind of fell into line. And then there were a number of other supporting organizations that came on board early on. They weren't considered founding members because we'd already received our recognition by the ICBS. And you see over there the treasured letter that we finally got from International Blue Shield. But we also have, support from the Archaeological Institute of America, which is a very large organization, and SAA, the Archaeology SAA, and many others. So as we formed the organization, we began to think about what our goals would be. And at that time, of course, the US ratification of the 1954 Hague Convention was primary, and we had good contacts at the Office of the Secretary of Defense who were in support, people at the Department of State who were in support, and even members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff who were in support. And so we kind of began that lobbying effort right away. But also we needed to create a membership, because the Blue Shield is a membership organization in the US, which is maybe a bit different sometimes than in other countries. But we solicited members of the public to sign on to Blue Shield, partly in order to be able to raise money. We created a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So you could get a tax deduction for your donation and membership to the Blue Shield. And this was successful for us in large part because of the public awareness of the looting of the Iraq Museum. How could something like this happen? Many people, knew about the history of the US and the monuments, men and women protecting heritage in World War II. How could this happen? So that was one of our big goals, is to create a membership base to support us, promote other legal protections, maybe besides the Hague Convention, that could protect cultural property, like, immediate legal protections for import of cultural property into Iraq. And Patty was very involved in that. Coordinating with the US military. This was important because we were on an extremely high operational tempo in the US military in the 2000s, sending unit after unit to Iraq, unit after unit going to Afghanistan, the Horn of Africa, and many other places. And we were able to get in there at a time when units were going everywhere and provide them with some information about cultural property protection. Because even though the US wasn't a member of the Hague Convention, we followed it as customary international law, which was always something we were reminding people of while we were working on the lobbying effort itself. We had a number of volunteers who participated in doing the training, legal, archaeologists, collections managers, conservators, art historians, all bought into the effort. And with the funding that we raised, through being a membership organization, we were able to support travel and just the capability of us going to military installations. We went to Fort Bragg, we went to Fort Dix. I'll have a couple pictures in a second, but and then raising public awareness. So we had some conferences, some meetings to try to argue for the US ratification of the Hague Convention and to explain what it is that we were trying to do. And as we all know, we often say things to get public attention and understanding, like we're like the Red Cross, but for culture, etc. And I think that resonated with a lot of people at the time. And then also our goal, while the US wasn't that involved at the, we were more involved in the military side of the Hague Convention, but we also recognized the Blue Shield international goals of helping cultural organizations for emergency planning and armed conflicts, both, but also human-caused disasters and naturally caused disasters. So after a vigorous lobbying campaign by Patty, Nancy Wilkie, our recent departed past president, and many others. John Russell was on our board and was very active with us. We finally got the Senate to vote on 26th of December 2008 to provide its advice and consent for ratification of the Hague Convention. It was a big deal. It was a moment in time when I think it couldn't have happened any other time, because it was right before the huge financial crisis hit, just literally days after this. And we had the leadership in the Senate who were willing to vote on this. And in fact, it's interesting to note that Joe Biden, now President Joe Biden, was then Senator Joe Biden, and he was the senior leader of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the time that they ratified the Hague Convention. We then went on to deposit our instrument of ratification at UNESCO on 13 March 2009 to make it official. So some of the things that are our successes that we've had based on those goals that I was just showing you, the US CBS volunteers I mentioned earlier, training volunteers, have provided, I gave up counting kind of. I started, a few years ago, I was trying to count those early ones. And then I thought, well, and then there's been, these units, as we spread out and made a network, people, Blue Shield, people living in different parts of the country have trained people in their areas. Because our Army Reserve, it's a little bit like the TA in the UK military, it's regionally based. You're serving near your hometown. And a lot of the responsible military for the Hague Convention issues and cultural property protection in the US military are Army reservists, just like I was in Army Civil Affairs. And so by my best accounting, it's well over 2,000 people and counting even now. And so these are just some images of trainings we've done. The above are the Marines at the Smithsonian a few years ago. Below, we're at Fort Dix, I think, New Jersey, there, training a unit getting ready to go to Iraq many years ago. And like I said, we did many, and I pulled several images from trainings that we've done over the years. So you get the idea, it's a lot. Development of cultural heritage inventory. So with this idea of generally trying to advance military protections for cultural heritage, as the US was getting ready to launch into a campaign, an air campaign in Libya in 2011, which was dubbed Operation Unified Protector, I remember Patty Gerstenblith calling me up and saying, do you think the US military has a no strike list for Libya? And I said, gosh, that's a good question. I would assume so. We made some outreach calls, and it was communicated to the Blue Shield that it would be welcomed if we did have some information about important cultural heritage sites in Libya. If we would share that would be welcomed. We did kind of an emergency group thing with a number of archaeologists, and were able to submit that just on the eve of the US and coalition bombing of Libya. which was very successful. That information did reach the Defense Intelligence Agency and led to increased U.S. Department of Defense sort of partnership networking with the academic community, with the Blue Shield, and with other NGOs interested in cultural property protection, and has led to NATO being more cognizant of the ramifications of these kind of coalition campaigns, allied campaigns, and their responsibilities. It's not just a host nation responsibility or treaty responsibility if you're a state's party to the Hague Convention, but it's also when we work as coalitions, how we can coordinate that effort. I think Peter Stone is probably in this picture somewhere of the NATO meeting. So we also, as mentioned earlier, contribute to legal responsibilities and try to promote legal responsibility legislation in addition to the Hague Convention that might be for cultural property protection. And I should have mentioned early on that one of the challenges in the US is that we don't have a Department of Culture. We don't have a Ministry of Culture. It's very, we protect culture within the United States in a pretty decentralized way. And I won't bore you with all the weird networks that and interagency machinations of that. But suffice it to say that there was a lot of attention during the crisis where ISIS was intentionally destroying cultural heritage in Iraq and Syria and across the region. And there was a lot of interest from members of Congress about what the US capabilities were. And we took that opportunity to re-educate people about the Hague Convention. And here you see Patty at a, it's hard to see her on the left there, but she's speaking to a group of congressional staffers. We're actually on Capitol Hill there, speaking to congressional staffers, congresspeople, some congressmen presented during that meeting, and they wanted to be briefed on what could be done to protect cultural property in this armed conflict with armed non-state actors, groups like the Islamic State. And it led to the passage ultimately of the 2016 Protect and Preserve International Cultural Property Act. And to go along with this event where Patty and others were speaking, they also had requested an exhibition, like just a poster exhibition there on Capitol Hill to educate members of Congress and staffs. And so that's my colleague, Dr. Catherine Hansen, who's an archaeologist, and me putting up the exhibition to kind of lead to that education. And so the exciting part is that the Blue Shield is included in the text of this legislation as one of the NGOs that is part of protection of cultural property and part of a larger US government interagency working group that is led by the Department of State, which is called the Cultural Heritage Coordinating Committee. And you see that here. One of our kind of victories that we've had really recently is that as part of the preservation working group of the CHCC, the US submitted, the Blue Shield was part of the drafting committee to submit for the first time, even though we ratified the treaty in 2009, we had never submitted a US report about our activities, which were many. And so we took the opportunity to use the CHCC as a platform to pull together those that are necessary to create those reports. And many of you have been involved in creating them yourself, but you need the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for us, the Department of State. You need the Department of Defense to talk about what they're doing on the military requirements, et cetera. And I give credit that this was sort of possible because of the 2016 legislation and the fact that you have all these groups that are kind of required to come together under that. And that included the Department of Defense. And you see here General Daryl Guthrie, who's the head of at the time, he was the head of Army Civil Affairs and became part of the CHCC discussions. And so that pulled DOD into it. And it's been very successful that we were finally able to do that report, and hopefully you'll be able to see it on the portal pretty soon. We also have been very involved in disseminating the 1954 Hague Convention, as Blue Shield committees usually are, and cultural property protection awareness for the military. You see here the guide to Mosul heritage and the guide to heritage in Raqqa. This was a small, a pretty compact little booklet. I don't know if you can see it here. It's just the size of a passport. It was kind of modeled on the Mali passport that UNESCO created in Mali many years ago. And it's in English, Arabic, and Kurdish for those forces who were fighting the Islamic State to retake the heritage, or retake the city of Mosul and retake the city of Raqqa. So those were an effort of Blue Shield, the Smithsonian, the Penn Cultural Heritage Center, and our colleague, Dr. Brian Daniels, who's also on the Blue Shield board, I think has joined us on the call, the Military Cultural Heritage Action Group, which is a group of, well, to simply say it, personnel who work for the Department of Defense as archaeologists, as cultural heritage collections managers, et cetera, coming together with academic community to work on products like this and to provide information to the military. So it was a great collaboration. And those were disseminated both digitally and in printed form to the US coalition and the coalition built by the Iraqis and the Kurds, and were disseminated by some of our civil affairs colleagues working in Iraq and in Syria. And Michael Delacruz, that's how I first met Michael Delacruz, who works for Blue Shield UK, is I said, please take these little guides with you when you go abroad on your next military assignment, which was to Iraq. Another tool that we've created is these Southcom playing cards, and this was a collaboration. They were created by the US Committee of the Blue Shield, and the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative provided some funding, and the American Institute for Conservation had them printed and distributed. So again, our partnerships are what makes the strength of the Blue Shield, and these have been provided to US military working in the US Southern Command. We've also been involved in trying to get media attention for the Blue Shield, for the Hague Convention, and especially around the time frame when Islamic State was so active, there were some really good opportunities to do so. Here you see our president, Patty Gerstenblith, and I was somewhere on the stage for this, but Patty got the good photo up. We were both interviewed for this documentary, The Destruction of Memory, which is a really fabulous sort of historical overview of the destruction of cultural property, kind of starting around the World War I, going all the way up through the Bosnia conflict and up to the present day. So, and that was widely released and lauded, and you can still watch it online even now. And more recently, the film Stout-Hearted, which is George Stout and the Guardians of Art, about the monuments man, George Stout, and how he kind of was the brains behind the creation of the monuments men and women in World War II, and as well as the father of kind of modern conservation science. And you see here one of our board members, one of our founding board members, Perry McGowan, being interviewed. Patty was also interviewed. I was interviewed. So we were able to kind of get the word out there, and you see Perry and I are both proudly wearing our Blue Shield pins. So what are we doing in the future? With all those successes behind us, we realize we still have a lot to do. The US so far has not ratified either the first or the second protocol to the Hague Convention. This is something we'd like to turn our attention to. We want to continue to support training for our US Army Monuments Officer program. The Army has really, in recent times, taken it very seriously that they need to have not just monuments officers, but also several other kinds of civil sector experts. This is the history of civil affairs going all the way back to World War II. And there's a re-engagement and effort to recruit new monuments officers who have a lot of education and experience, like Colonel Scott DeJesse that you see here in this photo, who is leading the way in that effort. And we're actually preparing to direct commission several archaeologists, art historians, preservation experts in just like the coming months. We have people preparing for that direct commissioning program. So we want to keep supporting that. We want to keep supporting the US government's efforts on their interactions with UNESCO, sending US delegations to the Hague Convention meetings, even though the United States is not currently a member of UNESCO. We recognize the importance of engagement in the treaty meetings and in the implementation of the 1954 Hague Convention. And the Blue Shield is always there promoting those efforts and volunteering to be part of that. And then finally, continuing with our efforts for dissemination and public awareness of the 1954 Hague Convention. So that ends my presentation, and happy to answer any questions. And we also have here, as I mentioned, Patty Gerstenblith and Brian Daniels, and there may be some other US Blue Shield people here, but thanks.